When my husband passed away, he left me a fortune that could change generations. But I kept it a secret from everyone. My children, my friends, even my siblings. I wanted to see who truly cared about me, not my money. So I pretended to be homeless, living on the streets, begging for help. My own kids drove past me without stopping. My best friends ignored my calls. But my niece, the one everyone called worthless, she found me, took me in, and shared the little she had. She had no idea I was testing everyone. Before the story begins, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. My name is Beatrice, and I'm 72 years old. For most of my life, I believed family meant everything. I believed blood was thicker than water, that the people you raise would never turn their backs on you when you needed them most. I was wrong about almost all of it. When my husband Thomas died 3 years ago, I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. We'd been married for 48 years. He was my partner, my best friend, the only person who truly knew me. We met when I was 21, working at a diner downtown. He came in every morning for coffee and eggs. It took him 3 months to ask me out. 3 months of small talk and nervous smiles before he finally worked up the courage. Our first date was a disaster. His car broke down halfway to the restaurant, and we had to walk 2 miles in the rain. But we laughed the whole way, and I knew then that I'd marry him. We built a life together, a good life. He worked in commercial real estate, buying properties that nobody wanted and turning them into something valuable. I worked part-time as a secretary until our children were born, then stayed home to raise them. We had 2 kids. Jessica came first, then Michael 3 years later. They were beautiful babies, perfect. In that way, all parents think their children are perfect. The funeral was large. Everyone came. My daughter Jessica stood beside me holding my hand. My son Michael gave the eulogy. He talked about how Thomas taught him to fish, how patient he was, how much he loved his family. It was a beautiful speech. I cried through all of it. My sister Sandra called every day for 2 weeks after. My friends from church brought casseroles and stayed for coffee. Everyone said the right things. Everyone promised they'd be there for me. What none of them knew was that Thomas had been far wealthier than anyone imagined. We lived modestly, a nice house in a quiet neighborhood, nothing extravagant. We drove normal cars, a Toyota and a Honda, took 1 vacation a year, usually somewhere simple like the coast. We never flaunted anything, because Thomas believed wealth should be quiet, that money changed people, made them greedy and false. He'd seen it happen to friends, watched families tear themselves apart over inheritance. He didn't want that for us. His fortune came from patience and timing. He'd bought properties in parts of the city nobody wanted in the 70s and 80s. Warehouses, empty lots, buildings that needed work. Everyone thought he was crazy. But Thomas saw something others didn't. He held those properties for decades, watching the city grow around them. By the time he died, those investments had multiplied beyond anything we'd dreamed. The rundown warehouse he bought for $50,000 in 1978 sold for $12 million, 2 years before he passed. The empty lot he picked up for nothing became a shopping center. Every risk he took, every property everyone said was worthless, paid off in ways that seemed impossible. The lawyer's office was cold that morning. It was February, gray and wet outside. I sat across from Mr. Henderson, a man I'd never met before, as he explained what Thomas had left me. $500 million. I remember staring at him, certain I'd misheard. The number felt fake, like something from a movie. I asked him to repeat it. He said it again, slower this time, showing me documents, bank statements, property deeds. My hands shook as I held the papers. Thomas had protected me in ways I never understood while he was alive. He'd set everything up carefully, legally, making sure I'd be taken care of for the rest of my life and beyond. Mr. Henderson leaned forward. He was older, maybe 65, with gray hair and kind eyes. He told me to be careful, to tell no one, until I decided what to do with it. He said he'd been practicing law for 40 years and had seen families destroyed by inheritance more times than he could count. Brothers who stopped speaking, children who sued each other, marriages that fell apart. Money, he said, reveals people's true nature. It doesn't change them, it just shows you who they always were. I thanked him and left with those papers tucked in my purse, feeling the weight of a secret I didn't know if I wanted to carry. I drove home slowly, taking back roads, processing what I'd learned. Thomas had been sitting on this fortune for years and never said a word. We could have lived differently. We could have traveled more, bought a bigger house, helped our children with down payments. But he chose not to. He chose to live simply and leave it all to me to decide what to do with. I went home to my empty house and sat in Thomas's chair, the old recliner he'd had since before we were married. I could still smell his cologne on the fabric. I cried for hours, not because of the money, but because he wasn't there to help me understand what to do with it. I felt lost and small and terrified of making the wrong choice. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't tell anyone, not yet. I wanted to see how people treated me when they thought I had nothing. I wanted to know who loved me for me, not for what I could give them. Thomas had been right about money changing people. I'd seen it, too, in small ways over the years. The way people's eyes lit up when they heard about someone's inheritance. The way families fought over estates. Didn't want that poison in my life, so I stayed quiet and watched. The first few months after Thomas died, everyone checked in regularly. Jessica called twice a week. We'd talk about her kids, her job, little things. She worked as a marketing director for a software company, made good money. Her husband was an accountant. They lived in a big house in the suburbs with a pool and a 3-car garage. She seemed happy, or at least she seemed busy, which I guess some people mistake for happiness. Michael stopped by every Sunday afternoon. He'd bring coffee and we'd sit in the kitchen and talk. He was a contractor, built custom homes for wealthy clients. He did well for himself, too. Had a new truck every few years. A boat he kept at the marina. His wife was nice enough, though I never felt like she really liked me. She had that way of smiling where her mouth moved, but her eyes didn't. But Michael seemed content, and that was what mattered. My sister Sandra invited me to dinner once a month. She and her husband lived 20 minutes away in a condo overlooking the river. They'd retired early, spent their days golfing and traveling. Sandra had always been social, always had plans. She was 5 years younger than me, looked 10 years younger with all the work she'd had done. Not that I judged her for it. Everyone deals with aging differently. My friends from church brought casseroles and stayed for coffee. Martha, who'd been in my book club for 15 years. Diane, who I'd known since the kids were in elementary school. Ruth, who'd lost her husband a decade earlier and understood what I was going through. They all seemed genuine. They all seemed like they cared. Then slowly, gradually, things changed. Jessica's calls became less frequent. Once a week, then every 2 weeks, then once a month if I was lucky. When I called her, she was always busy. Too much work, the kids had activities. Her husband needed her for something. I understood, or I tried to. She had her own life, her own responsibilities. But there was something in her voice, something distant and impatient, like talking to me had become a chore rather than something she wanted to do. I'd ask about the grandkids. How's Emma doing in soccer? How's Ryan's science project coming along? She'd give me one-word answers. Fine. Good. Okay. Then she'd say she had to go, that she'd call me later. She never called later. Michael stopped coming by. He said the drive was too far, that gas was expensive, that Sundays were his only day to relax. I offered to visit him instead, but he always had plans. His wife had family things. They were going to the lake. They had friends coming over. There was always something. My grandchildren, who used to run to hug me, barely looked up from their phones when I saw them at holidays. I'd try to ask them about school, and they'd give me the same treatment their parents did. Short answers. Polite, but distant. Like I was an obligation they had to fulfill before they could get back to their real lives. My sister Sandra stopped inviting me to family gatherings. At first, she said it was because the events were small, just immediate family. Just us and the kids, she'd say. You understand? But then I found out from a neighbor who knew her husband that she'd hosted a huge birthday party for him and hadn't mentioned it to me. 50 people, catered food, live music. When I asked her about it, she got defensive, said she didn't think I'd want to come, that I seemed to prefer being alone lately, that she didn't want to impose on my grief. I told her I would have wanted to come. She changed the subject. My friends from church drifted away too. The casseroles stopped coming. The phone calls ended. I'd see them on Sundays, and they'd smile and wave from across the parking lot, but nobody sat with me anymore. Nobody asked how I was doing. Martha stopped inviting me to book club, said they were taking a break. Diane couldn't meet for coffee anymore, always too busy. Ruth, the one I thought understood what losing a spouse felt like, started avoiding me altogether. I became invisible. A widow they'd checked off their charity list, an old woman with nothing to offer them. I tried to understand it. People get busy. Life moves on. The initial sympathy after a death fades and everyone goes back to their normal routines. It's natural. It's human. But deep down, I knew what had happened. Without Thomas, I wasn't interesting anymore. I wasn't part of a couple. I wasn't invited to couple things. I was just an old woman sitting alone in a house that felt too big and too empty. 6 months after the funeral, I decided to test my theory. I started mentioning money troubles. Nothing dramatic at first, just small comments. I told Jessica my roof was leaking and I wasn't sure if I could afford to fix it. She suggested I get a loan. I told Michael my car was making a strange noise and I was worried about the repair costs. He said I should buy something cheaper, more practical, maybe one of those small economy cars. I told Sandra I was concerned about paying my property taxes on a fixed income. She said maybe I should sell the house and move somewhere smaller, somewhere with lower taxes. Nobody offered to help. Nobody offered money. Nobody even offered to come look at my roof or my car or help me figure out my finances. They just gave advice. Distant, hollow advice from people who didn't want to get too involved, from people who saw my problems as inconvenient reminders of their own aging parents, their own eventual mortality. I pushed harder. I told Jessica I was eating less because groceries were expensive. She sent me a link to couponing websites. I told Michael I was considering getting a part-time job at 72 years old. He said that might be good for me, keep me active. I told Sandra I'd been looking at studio apartments in bad neighborhoods because that's all I could afford. She said a change of scenery might be nice. Nobody stopped. Nobody questioned why a woman whose husband had worked his entire life couldn't afford basic necessities. Nobody wondered if maybe they should step in. They just kept offering suggestions, throwing advice at me like it was the same as actual help, like telling someone how to solve their problems was the same as solving them. That's when I knew for certain. They didn't care about me. They cared about not being burdened by me. They cared about maintaining the appearance of being good children, a good sister, good friends, without actually doing any of the work that required. I have one niece, my brother's daughter. Her name is Claire. She's 34 years old, never married, works as a teacher in an underfunded school across town. My brother died when Claire was 16. Heart attack, sudden and devastating. His wife, Claire's mother, remarried 2 years later and moved to Arizona with her new husband. Claire stayed here, finished high school, put herself through college. She'd see her mother once a year, if that. The family always talked about Claire with pity or disdain. Sandra used to say she was wasting her life, that she should have married young and married well instead of working with poor kids for poverty wages. Jessica called her boring, said she had no ambition. Michael said she'd end up alone and miserable. That teaching was a dead-end job for people who couldn't do anything better. But Claire was the only one who never stopped calling me. Every week, without fail, she'd check in, usually on Wednesday evenings after she finished grading papers. "How are you, Aunt Beatrice? Do you need anything?" Her voice was always warm, always genuine. She'd tell me about her students, about the little boy who finally learned to read, about the girl who'd been homeless but just got placed with a good foster family. She talked about her work like it mattered, like those kids mattered, in a way that made me remember why teaching used to be considered noble. She'd visit on weekends when she didn't have lesson plans to write. She'd bring groceries, nothing expensive, just basics. Bread, milk, eggs. She'd help me with small things around the house. Changed light bulbs I couldn't reach. Fixed a drawer that stuck. Helped me figure out how to use the new remote when I finally gave in and got cable. She never made me feel like a burden. She never looked at her watch or made excuses to leave early. When she was there, she was actually there, present and attentive in a way nobody else was anymore. I started noticing how different she was from the rest of them. When I mentioned my roof, she offered to come look at it herself. She brought a ladder and climbed up there, inspecting the shingles, taking photos. She said it looked okay, but that she'd keep an eye on it. When I said my car was acting up, she asked if I needed rides anywhere, offered to take me grocery shopping or to doctor's appointments. She didn't have much money herself, lived in a tiny apartment in a rough neighborhood, drove a car older than some of her students, but she always offered what she could. One Saturday afternoon, she brought over lunch and we sat in the backyard. It was late summer, warm but not too hot. She'd made sandwiches and brought fruit. We ate and talked about nothing important. The weather, the birds at the feeder, the flowers that were blooming, easy, comfortable conversation. After a while, I asked her something I'd been wondering. "Why do you keep coming around?" She looked surprised by the question. She set down her sandwich and thought for a moment. "Because you're my aunt," she said. "Because when my dad died, you were the only one who really checked on me. You called every week. You came to my high school graduation when my own mother didn't. You helped me move into my dorm. You were there. So now I'm here." I didn't remember it being a big deal. I'd just done what felt right. Called her. Showed up. Made sure she knew she wasn't alone. Small things. Normal things. Things any decent person would do. But to her, those small things had mattered. They'd mattered enough that now, almost 20 years later, she was still showing up for me. That's when the idea came to me. I wanted to know who else would show up. I wanted proof, undeniable and clear, of who would stand by me when I had nothing. So I came up with a plan, a terrible, desperate, necessary plan. I told everyone I was being evicted. I sent a group email to Jessica, Michael, and Sandra. I said I'd fallen behind on mortgage payments, that the bank was taking the house, that I had 30 days to find somewhere else to live. I made it sound dire and immediate and real. It wasn't hard to make it convincing. I'd been planting seeds about money troubles for months. This was just the natural conclusion of that story. I stopped maintaining the yard, let the grass grow long, let weeds take over the flower beds. I wore old clothes, things I'd kept in the back of my closet from 20 years ago. I stopped dyeing my hair, let the gray grow out completely. I looked tired and scared because, honestly, part of me was scared. Scared of what I was about to learn, scared that my worst suspicions would be confirmed. Jessica's response came via text, 3 hours after I sent the email. "Mom, that's awful. Have you looked into senior housing? There are some affordable options in the area. I can send you links if you want." That was it. No offer to help, no invitation to stay with her. Just a suggestion that I look into facilities where old people go when their families don't want to deal with them. Michael called. Not right away. 2 days later, during his lunch break. I could hear construction noise in the background. "Why didn't you plan better, Mom?" he said. His voice was irritated, like I'd disappointed him. Dad should have left things in order. "This shouldn't be your problem. I can't take you in, though. We don't have the space. The kids need their rooms. Maybe you could rent a room somewhere? Like a boarding house or something?" I asked if he could lend me money for the mortgage payments, just to catch up. He sighed. "Things are tight right now, Mom. We just bought the boat. Sarah wants to redo the kitchen. I don't have extra. Sorry." Sandra called that evening. She sounded concerned, but in that performative way people sound when they're trying to seem like they care without actually caring. "Oh, Beatrice, I'm so sorry to hear this. I wish I could help, I really do, but our place is just too small. And with Bill's back problems, we really can't have house guests. Have you thought about maybe staying in a shelter for a while? Just until you figure things out? I hear they're not so bad these days. Very clean, very safe." I told her I didn't want to stay in a shelter. She said sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do. Sometimes life humbles us. Maybe this is God's way of teaching you something. She actually said that, like losing my home was a spiritual lesson I needed to learn. My friends from church offered prayers when I mentioned it after service. Prayers, but nothing else. "We'll pray for you, Beatrice. God will provide. Stay strong." They squeezed my hand and walked away to their nice homes and their comfortable lives. The eviction date came. I'd set it for a Tuesday in early October. Cool weather, leaves starting to fall. I packed a small bag with clothes and a few photos of Thomas. I left everything else behind, all the furniture and memories and the life we'd built. I walked out of that house, the home I'd lived in for 30 years, and I didn't look back. I moved into a motel for 2 weeks, one of those cheap places on the highway where they rent by the week and don't ask questions. The room smelled like cigarettes and the TV only got 3 channels, but it didn't matter. I wasn't really there. I was preparing for what came next. I used that time to buy old dirty clothes from a thrift store, things with stains, things that smelled like mothballs and neglect. I stopped washing my hair. I let myself look broken, defeated, lost. I practiced sitting with my head down, my shoulders hunched. I practiced being invisible. Then I went to the streets. I know how it sounds. A 72-year-old woman with $500 million in the bank, choosing to sleep on park benches and beg for change. It sounds crazy. It sounds cruel, maybe even to myself. But I had to know. I had to see with my own eyes who would help me when I was at my very lowest, who would see me when I was invisible to everyone else. I chose a spot downtown near the shopping district on 5th Street. It was a busy area, lots of foot traffic, expensive stores, nice restaurants, the kind of place where people with money went to spend it. I knew my family and friends passed through there regularly. Jessica's office was 2 blocks away. Michael's construction company had a project nearby. Sandra shopped there every week. I found a spot near a bank, under an awning that would keep me dry if it rained. I laid out a piece of cardboard I'd taken from behind a grocery store. I sat on it with my legs crossed and a paper cup in front of me. I kept my head down. I didn't speak unless someone spoke to me first. I tried to disappear into the sidewalk, become part of the architecture that people's eyes slide past without seeing. The first day was the hardest. Not because of the physical discomfort, though that was real enough. The concrete was cold. My back ached within an hour, but the emotional weight of it, of making myself that vulnerable, that exposed, was overwhelming. Every person who walked past felt like a judgment. Every averted gaze felt personal. But something interesting happened. Strangers helped me. Hundreds of people walked past that first day. Most ignored me, which was expected, but enough didn't. A young woman in a business suit stopped and gave me a $5 bill. An older man brought me a sandwich from the deli across the street. A teenager, couldn't have been more than 16, stopped and asked if I was okay, if there was someone he could call. These people didn't know me. They owed me nothing, but they saw me and responded with kindness. The second day, I saw Jessica. It was around lunchtime. She came out of her office building with 2 co-workers, laughing about something. They walked right past me. I was maybe 15 feet away, close enough that I could hear their conversation. They were talking about a restaurant they wanted to try, some new place that had opened nearby. Jessica walked within 10 feet of where I sat. I could see her perfectly. Her nice clothes, her expensive purse, her confident walk. She didn't even glance in my direction. She didn't see me, or maybe she did see me and chose not to look. Either way, my daughter, the child I'd carried and birthed and raised, walked past me while I sat on the street, and she didn't stop. She didn't slow down. She didn't wonder if maybe that homeless woman looked familiar. She just kept walking, kept laughing, kept living her comfortable life. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and grab her shoulders and shake her and ask how she could be so blind. But I stayed quiet. I stayed still. I let her go. Because that was the point. To see who would help me when they didn't have to, when I couldn't offer them anything in return. The third day, Michael drove past in his truck. The new one. The black one with the chrome details that probably cost more than most people make in a year. I saw him through the windshield. He was on his phone, smiling at something. He drove right by without slowing down. My son, who I'd carried for 9 months, who I'd rocked to sleep as a baby, who I'd helped with homework and driven to baseball practice and cheered for at every game, drove past me like I wasn't there. The fourth day, Sandra came out of a coffee shop with 2 of her friends. They were all dressed nicely, carrying shopping bags from expensive stores. They were laughing, talking about their upcoming trip to wine country. They walked right past me. Actually, one of Sandra's friends looked at me with disgust and moved to the other side of the sidewalk, pulling Sandra with her. Sandra followed without question, without even looking to see who they were avoiding. The fifth day was a Sunday. I saw people from church walking to the parking lot after service. Martha, Diane, Ruth. They were in a group talking about the sermon. They walked past me. Ruth looked right at me for a moment. I thought maybe she recognized something, some flicker of familiarity, but she looked away quickly and kept walking. I sat there for 6 days. 6 days of watching the people who claimed to love me walk past me like I didn't exist. 6 days of feeling invisible, worthless, forgotten. 6 days of understanding exactly what Thomas had meant when he said money reveals people's true nature. Because when they thought I had nothing, when I needed them most, they revealed that their love had conditions, that their care had limits, that I mattered to them only as long as I wasn't inconvenient. But strangers showed me humanity. A homeless man named Marcus who slept 3 blocks away came by on the second day and gave me half his sandwich. A woman who couldn't have been much better off than I appeared to be stopped and left $2 in my cup. A police officer who could have moved me along instead asked if I needed help getting to a shelter. These people had nothing, but they offered what they could. On the 7th day, Claire found me. I heard her voice before I saw her. Aunt Beatrice! The sound of my name spoken with shock and disbelief. Oh my God, Aunt Beatrice, is that you? I looked up slowly, deliberately. She was standing there with a bag of groceries, still in her teaching clothes from the week. Her face showed pure horror. She dropped everything. The groceries hit the sidewalk and rolled away. She didn't care. She fell to her knees beside me, right there on the dirty concrete, not caring who was watching or what they thought. What happened? Her voice was shaking. Why didn't you call me? Where have you been? Why are you out here? I told her the story I'd told everyone else, that I'd lost the house, that I had nowhere to go, that I'd been too ashamed to ask for help, too proud to admit I'd failed so completely. She started crying, actually crying right there on the street, tears running down her face, her voice breaking. "You're not a failure," she said. "You're my family. You should have called me. You should have told me." I told her I didn't want to be a burden. She looked at me like I'd said something incomprehensible. "You're not a burden," she said firmly. "You're never a burden. Come on, we're getting you out of here right now." She tried to pull me up, but I resisted weakly. I can't impose on you, Claire. You barely have room for yourself. She wasn't listening. She was already gathering my things, the small bag I'd brought, the cardboard I'd been sitting on. She took my hand and pulled me to my feet. Her grip was strong, determined. We're going to my place. You're staying with me. I don't want to hear any arguments. She led me to her car, an old Honda with one door that didn't match the others. She'd told me once that she'd bought it from a salvage yard and fixed it herself with the help of a friend. The passenger seat had a tear in it. The radio didn't work, but she opened the door for me like it was a luxury vehicle, helped me in gently, made sure I was comfortable before closing it carefully. She went back for her dropped groceries, gathering the ones that hadn't rolled too far. Then she got in the driver's seat and sat there for a moment, both hands on the wheel, taking deep breaths. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry you went through this alone. I should have checked on you more. I should have known something was wrong." I told her it wasn't her fault. She shook her head. "It is, though. You're my family. I should have been there." She drove me to her apartment. It was in a building that had seen better days, in a neighborhood where you heard sirens at night. The elevator was broken, so we walked up 3 flights of stairs. She kept one hand on my elbow the whole way, steadying me, making sure I didn't fall. Her apartment was small, a studio really, with a Murphy bed and a kitchenette and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. But it was clean and neat, decorated with photos of her students and plants she'd grown from seeds. "You take the bed," she said immediately. "I'll sleep on the couch." I tried to argue. The couch was tiny, a love seat she'd probably gotten from a thrift store. She was too tall to sleep on it comfortably, but she wouldn't hear it. She gave me clean towels, showed me where everything was, told me to make myself at home. That night, she ran me a bath. Actually ran it herself, tested the temperature, made sure it was right. She gave me clean clothes, soft pajamas that smelled like lavender. While I bathed, she made soup from a can, nothing fancy, but she served it in a real bowl with real silverware and sat with me while I ate. "I'm going to figure this out," she told me. "We'll get you back on your feet. There are programs, resources. I know people who work in social services. We'll find you a place to live. Until then, you stay here as long as you need." That night, as I lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, I heard her crying in the other room. She was on the phone with someone, maybe a friend. "I don't understand how this could happen," she was saying. "How could her own family let her end up on the streets? What's wrong with people?" I pulled the blanket over my head and cried too. Not because I was sad anymore, but because I'd found what I was looking for. I'd found the person who would show up, who would sacrifice her own comfort, without hesitation, who would love me not despite my circumstances, but through them. I stayed with Claire for 3 weeks, 3 weeks of sleeping in her bed, while she folded herself onto that impossible couch, 3 weeks of watching her leave for work at 6 in the morning and come home at 7 at night with papers to grade and lessons to plan. 3 weeks of seeing how little she had and how much she gave anyway. She never made me feel like a burden, not once. Every morning she made breakfast for both of us. Toast and eggs, nothing fancy, but she served it like it mattered. She asked how I slept. She made sure I had everything I needed. On her way home from work, she'd stop at the store and pick up things she thought I'd like. A magazine, a candy bar. Small things that cost almost nothing, but showed She was thinking of me. I watched her budget. She kept a notebook on the kitchen counter where she wrote down every expense: rent, utilities, groceries, gas. She was saving for something, I noticed. There was a line item labeled emergency fund where she put $50 every month. $50 that she probably needed for other things, but she set it aside anyway because she was responsible like that. One evening, I found her crying at the kitchen table. She had her laptop open, looking at her bank account. I asked what was wrong. She wiped her eyes quickly and smiled, but it didn't reach anywhere real. "Nothing," she said. "Just tired." But I could see the screen. She'd paid her rent that day. Her checking account showed $83 remaining. Her next paycheck wasn't for another week. I felt sick knowing I was part of why those numbers were so low. She was feeding 2 people on a budget meant for 1. That night, I lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling. This had gone far enough. I'd gotten my answer. I knew who loved me and who didn't. I knew who would show up and who would turn away. The test was over. It was time to end it. The next morning, I told Claire I needed to run an errand. She offered to drive me, but I said I wanted to walk, needed the fresh air. She looked worried, but didn't push. She gave me her spare key and made me promise to call if I needed anything. I walked 12 blocks to Mr. Henderson's office. He wasn't expecting me, but his secretary recognized me from before and told him I was there. He came out immediately, looking concerned. "Mrs. Patterson, is everything all right? I need to make some arrangements," I told him. We sat in his office and I explained what I wanted to do. He listened without interrupting, though his eyebrows rose several times. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me for a long moment. "Are you certain about this?" I'd never been more certain of anything. It took 2 days to arrange everything. Legal documents, bank transfers, phone calls. Mr. Henderson handled it all with the efficiency of someone who'd done this kind of thing many times before. On the 3rd day, everything was ready. I called a family meeting, sent a group email to Jessica, Michael, and Sandra. Told them I had important news about my situation and needed to see them all together. I asked them to meet me at Claire's apartment on Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock. I didn't tell Claire what I was planning. I just asked if I could have some people over. She said, of course, clean the already clean apartment, and offered to make coffee. Saturday came. Claire was nervous, fluttering around the apartment arranging things that didn't need arranging. She'd taken the morning shift at a tutoring center to make extra money, came home at noon, and immediately started preparing. She wanted everything to be perfect. At 1:30, she changed clothes 3 times. She wanted to make a good impression, even though I'd told her it didn't matter what she wore. She settled on a simple dress, something she probably wore to parent-teacher conferences. She looked beautiful and kind and exactly like herself. At 2 o'clock, they arrived. Jessica first, in her Mercedes SUV. She parked on the street and I watched from the window as she looked at the building with barely concealed distaste. She checked her phone twice before getting out of the car. She was wearing expensive workout clothes, the kind people wear when they want everyone to know they can afford a personal trainer. Michael pulled up in his truck 5 minutes later. He sat there for a moment, checking his own phone before finally climbing out. He looked at the building the same way Jessica had, like he was visiting a foreign country he'd rather not be in. Sandra arrived last in her husband's BMW. She took the longest getting out of the car, checking her makeup in the mirror, fixing her hair. She was dressed like she was going to brunch at a country club. Heels and pearls and too much perfume. They all stood on the sidewalk together for a moment talking. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could read their body language, the crossed arms, the shared looks, the way they all seemed annoyed to be there. Claire answered the door when they knocked. She was smiling, trying to be welcoming, but I could see how intimidated she was. These were people who'd always looked down on her, always made her feel less than. "Come in," she said warmly. "Thank you for coming." They filed in without returning her greeting. Jessica looked around the small apartment with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe, or judgment. Michael stood near the door like he might need to leave quickly. Sandra perched on the edge of the couch like she was afraid of catching something. "Mom," Jessica said, "you said you had news." I was sitting in the only chair, Claire's reading chair by the window. Mr. Henderson was standing beside me. I'd asked him to be there as a witness, as a legal presence. He'd brought his briefcase and his serious face. "Yes," I said, "I have news. Please sit down." There wasn't enough seating for everyone. Claire offered to stand, but I gestured for her to sit on the bed. Michael stayed standing by the door. Sandra remained at the couch. Jessica sat beside her. "I want to start," I said slowly, "by telling you what happened over the past few months. When your father died, he left me a substantial amount of money. $500 million, to be exact." The room went silent, completely silent. Jessica's mouth opened slightly. Michael took a step forward. Sandra sat up straighter. "I chose not to tell anyone about this inheritance. I wanted to see how you would treat me if you thought I had nothing. So I pretended to be in financial trouble. I told you I was being evicted. I made myself homeless. I spent a week on the streets downtown sitting on a piece of cardboard begging for change." Jessica's face had gone pale. Michael's expression was unreadable. Sandra's hand had moved to her throat. "During that week, all three of you walked past me. Jessica, you walked past me on Tuesday during your lunch break. You were with your coworkers, laughing about a restaurant. You came within 10 feet of where I was sitting and you didn't even look at me. Michael, you drove past me in your truck on Wednesday. You were on your phone, smiling. Sandra, you walked past me on Thursday with your friends. One of them actually pulled you to the other side of the sidewalk to avoid me." "I'm not saying this happened," Jessica said quickly. Her voice was shaking. "I don't remember seeing anyone who looked like you. I would have stopped if I'd known it was you." "Would you have?" I asked. "Because I sent you an email saying I was being evicted. I told you I had nowhere to go. You sent me a link to senior housing facilities. You didn't offer to let me stay with you. You didn't offer money. You suggested I look into affordable options." "That's not fair," Michael said. His face was red. "You didn't tell us how bad things really were. You said you were having trouble, not that you were going to be on the streets. If we'd known—" "You did know," I interrupted. "I told you exactly what was happening. I asked for help, and all of you offered advice instead of action. You offered suggestions instead of support. You made it clear that helping me would be inconvenient, would interfere with your boats and your kitchen renovations and your wine country trips." Sandra was crying now. Quiet tears that she kept wiping away with her fingers. "This isn't fair, Beatrice. You set us up. You lied to us. You can't blame us for not recognizing you when you were deliberately hiding." "I wasn't hiding," I said. I was right there, visible, present. The only thing that changed was my circumstances. When I was Thomas's wife, living in a nice house, you wanted to know me. When I was a homeless old woman with nothing to offer, I became invisible. I stood up slowly. My legs were shaking, but I forced myself to stay steady. Only one person found me. Only one person stopped. Claire came looking for me. She took me into her home even though she barely has room for herself. She gave me her bed. She fed me with money she didn't have. She cried because her family had failed me. She's been taking care of me for 3 weeks, sacrificing her own comfort, never once complaining or making me feel like a burden. Claire was crying now, too, but she didn't make a sound, just tears running down her face while she held her hands in her lap. I've made some decisions, I continued. With Mr. Henderson's help, I've restructured my inheritance. Claire, I'm giving you $50 million. Claire gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. No, she whispered. Aunt Beatrice, no, I can't. Yes, you can, and you will. You're going to use it to live comfortably, to help your students, to do the good work you do without worrying about money ever again. You showed me what family really means. You showed me that love isn't conditional. This is my thank you. I turned to face my children and my sister. They were all staring at me with expressions of shock and horror and dawning understanding. As for the rest of you, I'm leaving you what you gave me. Nothing. Not $1, not one piece of furniture, not one photograph. You'll inherit exactly what you offered when you thought I needed you. Mom, Jessica said, standing up quickly. Mom, please, you can't do this. We made a mistake. We're sorry. We'll do better. Michael was nodding frantically. We didn't understand. We thought you were okay. If we'd known it was this serious, we would have helped. I swear we would have. Sandra was sobbing openly now. Please, Beatrice, please don't do this. We're family. Family forgives. I looked at each of them in turn. These people I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for. These people who'd abandoned me the moment I became inconvenient. Family does forgive, I said quietly, but family also shows up. Family doesn't walk past each other on the street. Family doesn't offer advice when action is needed. Family doesn't make excuses about space and money and time when someone they love is suffering. You taught me that blood doesn't mean anything if there's no love behind it. So yes, I forgive you, but I don't forget. And I don't reward you for failing me when I needed you most. The remaining $450 million will be split between charities, organizations that help homeless people, shelters, food banks, programs that help teachers in underfunded schools, people who show up for strangers the way Claire showed up for me, the way Marcus shared his sandwich, the way that police officer offered help instead of moving me along. Those are the people who deserve my husband's fortune, not you. Mr. Henderson stepped forward with documents. These are already signed and filed. There's nothing to contest. It's done. Jessica sank back onto the couch. Michael leaned against the wall like his legs wouldn't hold him. Sandra covered her face with her hands. I need you all to leave now, I said. Claire and I have plans. They stood slowly, moving like sleepwalkers. Jessica tried to say something, but nothing came out. Michael opened his mouth and closed it again. Sandra walked to the door and stopped, turned back. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I know, I said. So am I. They left, slowly, silently, like mourners at a funeral. which in a way I suppose they were, the death of their inheritance, the death of the future they'd imagined, the death of a relationship that had been hollow for longer than any of us wanted to admit. When the door closed behind them, Claire and I sat in silence for a long time. She was still crying, but differently now, relief, maybe, or shock, or grief for what this would do to the family, broken as it already was. "I can't take $50 million, she finally said. "That's too much. That's insane." "It's not insane. It's what you deserve. You work yourself to exhaustion for children who need you. You give everything you have and never ask for anything back. Now you don't have to choose between helping your students and paying your rent. Now you can do both." She shook her head slowly. "They're going to hate me." "They don't hate you. They hate themselves. They hate that they failed a test they didn't know they were taking. But that's not your fault, and it's not your problem. You didn't do anything wrong. You just did what was right." She came and sat beside my chair, took my hand. "This doesn't feel like winning. It's not about winning. It's about justice. It's about making sure the people who show up are rewarded, not the people who turn away. Your father would understand this, Claire. He knew what it was like to be overlooked, to be counted out. He would want you to have this." We sat together as the afternoon light faded, two women who'd lost so much and found something unexpected in each other. Not just family, but chosen family, the kind that matters more than blood. Over the following weeks, the reality of what I'd done settled in. Jessica sent angry emails that I didn't respond to. Michael left voicemails that I deleted without listening. Sandra wrote me a letter, 12 pages long, explaining all the ways I'd hurt her, how unfair I'd been, how I'd destroyed the family. I read it once and burned it in Claire's kitchen sink. My friends from church heard the story somehow. Gossip travels fast in small communities. They called to offer belated support, to say they'd had no idea things were so bad. I thanked them politely and told them I was fine. I didn't tell them about the money. I didn't tell them about anything. Claire found a bigger apartment. Nothing extravagant, but a real one-bedroom with actual space to breathe. She set up a room for me without asking if I wanted to stay. She just assumed I'd want to, and she was right. She kept teaching, even though she didn't have to anymore. She loved those kids too much to leave them. She started a foundation with part of the money, a fund that provided school supplies, winter coats, and food assistance for her students' families. She hired a social worker to help connect families with resources. She paid for tutoring programs and after-school activities. She did more good with that money in 6 months than most people do in a lifetime. As for me, I kept my promise. The bulk of the inheritance went to organizations that helped people like Marcus, like that young woman in the business suit who'd given me $5, like the police officer who'd offered kindness instead of judgment. I set up scholarships for teachers. I funded homeless shelters. I made sure Thomas's fortune went to people who understood what it meant to be human when being human required sacrifice. I bought myself a small house, nothing fancy, nothing that would draw attention, just a quiet place with a garden where I could grow tomatoes and roses. Claire visits twice a week. We have dinner together. We talk about her students, about the foundation, about everything and nothing. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh, if I should have given my children and my sister another chance, if family deserves forgiveness regardless of their failures. But then I remember sitting on that sidewalk, watching them walk past, feeling invisible, and worthless. I remember the week I spent discovering who people really were when they thought I had nothing to offer them. And I know I made the right choice. Not because I wanted revenge, though there was some satisfaction in it, but because I wanted justice. I wanted the people who showed up to be rewarded. I wanted Claire to know that her kindness mattered, that her sacrifices hadn't gone unnoticed, that being good had value even when nobody seemed to be watching. Thomas used to say that money doesn't change people, it just reveals them. He was right. It revealed my children's priorities. It revealed my sister's limits. It revealed my friend's convenience-based compassion. But it also revealed Claire's beautiful heart. It revealed the humanity of strangers. It revealed that love, real love, shows up even when it's hard. I'm 72 years old, and I've learned more in the past year than I learned in the previous 71. I've learned that family isn't about blood, it's about presence. I've learned that wealth means nothing if you're surrounded by people who only love what you can give them. I've learned that sometimes the people everyone overlooks are the ones worth knowing most, and I've learned that Claire was right that day in the backyard when she told me she kept showing up because I'd shown up for her. That's how love works. It's circular, it's reciprocal. You give it and it comes back, maybe not from the people you expect, but from the people who matter. I sleep well now, better than I have in years. There's no weight of pretending anymore, no performance of normalcy for people who don't really see me. I'm just myself, living quietly, giving freely, loving the people who proved they deserved it. Claire asked me recently if I had any regrets. We were sitting in my new garden drinking iced tea on a warm afternoon. The tomatoes were coming in beautifully. I thought about it. About Jessica and Michael and Sandra, about the grandchildren who grew up calling me Grandma but never really knew me, about the life I could have had if I'd just distributed the inheritance quietly, kept the peace, maintained the illusion of family harmony. No, I told her. No regrets at all. She smiled and squeezed my hand. That was all. Just that simple gesture of connection, of solidarity, of love that asked for nothing in return. That's worth more than $500 million. That's worth everything. What would you do if this happened to you? Tell me in the comments. I always read them. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories like mine.